They told you to be good, to be honest, to be kind, to follow the rules, trust the process, and believe that virtue will be rewarded. But the world you were born into doesn't work that way. It was never built for goodness. It was built for order. And order is maintained not by the moral but by the strategic. From childhood, you were taught that goodness is strength, that if you play fair, the system will notice and you'll be safe. But the system doesn't notice goodness. It notices usefulness. And usefulness has never been measured by purity, only by precision. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote not for saints but for survivors. He knew that in a world ruled by appetite and fear, the man who clings to virtue for comfort becomes prey to those who use it as camouflage. Because morality, stripped of intelligence, becomes obedience. It turns lions into lambs and thinkers into martyrs. And the modern world loves martyrs. They decorate the walls of every system they die defending. Goodness is the softest weapon of control ever invented. It convinces you to obey while believing you're righteous, so it disguises your submission as integrity. It makes you proud of your chains. The architects of power have always known this. That's why every empire rewards obedience and punishes strategy. It's why schools teach compliance, not competence. It's why religions preach humility to the poor and forgiveness to the oppressed. It's why corporations use values as banners to disguise hierarchy as community. The illusion of goodness is this, that moral purity leads to justice. But history whispers another truth. Justice was never the goal. Stability was. Control was. Goodness was the aesthetic painted over the machinery of power. The world doesn't need you to be good. It needs you to be predictable. And when you refuse to play your assigned role, it calls you selfish, ruthless, immoral, anything that keeps you from realizing that the same rules don't apply upward. Because those who rise above morality do not reject it, they understand it. They use it the way a general uses terrain, as structure, not scripture. They see that morality is not truth. It's geometry, a map drawn by the winners to keep others marching in circles. That's why the powerful speak in moral language while acting in strategic silence. They tell you to be transparent while they move in shadow. They tell you to share while they consolidate. They tell you to trust while they design the contracts. And when you lose, they tell you it's because you weren't good enough. Goodness without power is theater. It makes you feel righteous while ensuring you never threaten the order that benefits others. It gives you meaning while it robs you of leverage. Look around. The loudest moralists are rarely the most moral. They are the most tactical. They know the game, that public virtue is currency and private control is empire. They posture as saints because saints are unassailable. And in a world built on perception, untouchability is the truest form of wealth. This is not cynicism. It's anatomy. The anatomy of a world that praises kindness but rewards cunning. A world where compassion is expected from the weak and strategy is reserved for the strong. But here's the paradox. True strategy doesn't destroy morality. It transcends it. It understands that goodness, when used with intelligence, becomes a weapon of design. That mercy, when chosen rather than reflexive, becomes control. That honesty, when timed, becomes influence. The goal is not to abandon goodness, it's to stop worshipping it, to stop being hypnotized by it, to see it for what it is, one of many tools in a larger arsenal. Machiavelli would tell you, it is good to appear good but dangerous to be good all the time, because appearance is leverage, and leverage moves empires. So the next time you're told to do the right thing, ask yourself, for whom? Who defined this right? Who benefits from your obedience? Because morality, like currency, only has value when others believe in it. And whoever defines belief defines the game. The lie of goodness is not that it exists, it's that it saves you. In truth, it blinds you, it pacifies you, it trains you to wait for reward instead of building your own. The world you live in doesn't punish the immoral. It punishes the uncalculated. It punishes those who act without understanding. And those who understand, they build kingdoms in silence. The powerful don't chase virtue, they choreograph it. They wear morality like a tailored robe, not because they believe in it, but because they know everyone else does. That is the first lesson of strategy. to master symbols before they master you. Because when you stop trying to be good and start trying to be effective, you stop being a piece on the board and start becoming the hand that moves it. Morality didn't evolve to free us. It evolved to control us, to turn chaos into cooperation, and cooperation into hierarchy. From tribes to kingdoms to corporations, every system learned the same secret. If you can define good, you never have to enforce it. People will police themselves. At its core, morality is emotional architecture. It wires guilt to action, pride to obedience, fear to defiance. You don't need guards when shame builds the walls, and you don't need prisons when approval becomes the reward. Think of how early it begins. Children are taught that obedience is kindness, that questioning authority is arrogance, that honesty means silence when the truth would make others uncomfortable. Each lesson sounds noble. Each one trains submission. By adulthood, the mind has learned to seek safety through conformity, to mistake being liked for being right, to feel virtue not in clarity, but in compliance. And that conditioning is what makes entire civilizations governable. The powerful discovered long ago that fear alone is unstable. Fear breeds rebellion, but morality that breeds participation. It convinces the flock to build the fence and call it faith. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He wrote that religion was useful, not sacred, that it was necessary to keep men good, which really meant predictable. He understood that moral language could bind a kingdom tighter than any sword, because morality, once internalized, becomes self-enforcing. That's why every empire teaches virtue differently to each class. The rulers are taught pragmatism, the workers are taught piety, the poor are taught humility, each lesson tailored to keep energy flowing upward. Goodness, then, is not universal. It's positional. What is good for the system may be ruin for the individual, yet the mind, craving belonging, accepts the contradiction. It feels pleasure when obeying the moral code, even when that code harms it. This is psychological genius, to make the prisoner love his warden, to make the debtor worship the lender, to make the exploited thank the exploiter for opportunity. Watch how morality is used today. Corporations drape themselves in virtue, diversity, ethics, sustainability, while exploiting unseen hands. Governments speak of justice while selling policy to the highest bidder. Media preaches compassion while monetizing outrage. Each moral performance keeps the crowd engaged, emotional, divided, believing that outrage is action. It works because morality speaks the language of emotion, not logic. It hijacks the limbic system, floods it with righteousness, and shuts down reflection. Anger feels like clarity. Guilt feels like redemption. And while you feel good about your virtue, someone somewhere is moving the money, the policy, the code. That's why the moral man rarely wins. He is sincere, and sincerity is predictable. The strategic man appears sincere, and that appearance becomes leverage. He understands the emotional economy of virtue. He trades perceived goodness for real influence. Morality, when used consciously, is theater, a language that commands trust. The Machiavellian speaks it fluently, but never believes his own script. Because belief clouds precision, and precision is survival. Notice how even your inner voice has been colonized. When you plan boldly, it whispers, "Who do you think you are?" When you choose yourself, it warns, "That's selfish." That voice isn't conscience, it's programming. Centuries of conditioning compressed into a reflex. To outgrow it is not to become evil. It's to become sovereign. To feel guilt, examine it, and act with intention rather than reflex. To use empathy as strategy, not as leash. That is psychological liberation, not cruelty, but authorship. The Machiavellian mind studies morality like a toolmaker studies metal. He asks, what shape must it take to serve my design? He uses honesty to disarm, compassion to recruit, restraint to dominate. Every virtue becomes leverage when detached from vanity. This is not manipulation in the shallow sense. It's awareness, the understanding that humans run on stories and stories run on morality. If you can edit the story, you can direct the civilization. Because moral codes are operating systems, update the code, and you rewrite reality. And so the question shifts, not how can I be good, but who defined good and why? Once you ask that, the fog begins to lift. You start seeing motives behind commandments. You realize morality was never divine, it was designed. The purpose of awakening is not to discard ethics, but to reclaim authorship of them, to choose when to be gentle and when to be iron, to make goodness serve awareness, not replace it. That's the second lesson of strategy. Morality without analysis is submission, but morality guided by design becomes power, because the goal was never to be good, it was to be effective. And when you master the psychology of goodness, you no longer need permission to be wise. Most people live in reaction. Their morality, their anger, their choices, all are responses to forces they don't control. They call it conviction, they call it purpose, but it's usually programming wearing conviction's mask. The powerful don't live in reaction. They live in position, because position dictates outcome long before emotion enters the room. Strategy, at its essence, is emotional distance. It is the art of standing still while the world moves around you, of seeing the geometry of motion, not the noise of motion. Where the average mind sees right and wrong, the strategist sees cause and effect. To think strategically is to think architecturally. It's to look at people not as enemies or allies, but as variables. To see time not as a line, but as a network of potential leverage points. It's to move in silence, not because you fear being seen, but because noise corrupts accuracy. The crowd wants drama. The strategist wants control. The crowd wants to be right. The strategist wants to win. And winning, to him, isn't victory. It's alignment. A configuration of events that unfold according to his design, often without anyone realizing he was ever involved. Machiavelli called this prudenza, foresight sharpened by patience. It's not about manipulation for its own sake. It's about survival in a world ruled by perception, where truth is negotiable and timing is king. A strategic mind doesn't argue with illusion, it rearranges it. It doesn't resist the storm, it redirects the wind. Because power isn't resistance, it's redirection. It's the capacity to move others without motion, to bend structures by understanding their balance points. To think strategically, you must first abandon the need to be good, and then abandon the need to be seen as good. Both are cages. Both are currency that others use to buy your obedience. When you no longer seek moral approval, you gain freedom of action, the rarest resource in existence. This freedom terrifies the untrained mind, because it feels like darkness. It feels cold, detached, alien. But in that stillness lives clarity, the space between impulse and decision. That is where strategy is born. Think of a chess player who no longer sees pieces but patterns. He doesn't think of winning the battle, he thinks of controlling the tempo. Each move is quiet, deliberate, invisible to the impatient. That's the Machiavellian's rhythm, slow precision disguised as stillness. The strategic mind asks different questions, not is this right, but does this work? Not will they like me, but will they follow? Not what do I gain, but what does this move unlock next? Because strategy is not about single victories, it's about chains of inevitability. A move that looks small today but shapes outcomes for decades. A phrase spoken once that becomes a culture. A rule written in silence that becomes a law. This is the power of invisible design. You can see it in the most mundane places. In negotiation rooms, where silence bends confidence. In politics, where optics outweigh honesty. In relationships, where patience disarms hostility. Every field is a battlefield of unseen positioning, and every master of it understands one truth: emotion clouds precision. That's why the strategist cultivates stillness. Not emotional numbness, but emotional control. He feels deeply, but he acts selectively, because passion is fuel, and fuel must be directed, or it burns everything it touches. The modern mind equates passion with authenticity, but the Machiavellian mind knows authenticity without control is chaos. It wins applause, not power. The strategist performs when it's useful, retreats when it's time, and acts when probability, not morality, gives permission. To think this way isn't cruelty, it's calibration. It's understanding that good intentions are a compass, But navigation requires maps, timing, and weather. Strategy is the science of those unseen forces. It's morality upgraded to mathematics, and yet the strategist is not inhuman. He simply plays a different game. While others chase comfort, he chases clarity. While others seek validation, he seeks influence. And when he acts, he does so with a still hand, not to harm but to shape. Because the highest form of control isn't domination, it's orchestration. When others act out of emotion and you act out of design, you own the rhythm of their reactions. That rhythm is leverage. The modern strategist uses the same principles Machiavelli wrote for princes. Observe quietly, influence indirectly, reward obedience selectively. Be merciful when it strengthens fear. Be honest when it magnifies trust. Every virtue, when placed with precision, becomes a gear in the machine. The strategist doesn't need loyalty. He designs dependency. He doesn't demand respect. He builds systems that generate it. He doesn't ask for power. He constructs environments where others grant it naturally. That's the difference between good and strategic. The good man acts within rules. The strategist rewrites them. The good man reacts to systems. The strategist designs them. The good man serves order. The strategist becomes order. This is the third law of control. Goodness seeks approval. Strategy seeks alignment. And alignment, once achieved, creates outcomes that no force can resist. When you learn to think strategically, you stop trying to win arguments and start winning structures. You stop chasing validation and start engineering inevitability. And in that shift, from emotion to design, you stop being human furniture in someone else's palace and start building the walls of your own. Every structure that governs your life, government, economy, morality, even love, began as a manipulation that outlived its manipulator. That's the secret the powerful never teach. Systems are just lies that gained infrastructure. Machiavelli knew this. He understood that the most stable kingdoms are not ruled by fear or loyalty, but by illusion. Illusion doesn't require soldiers. It recruits belief. And belief builds walls higher than any army could. Manipulation, at its purest, isn't deceit. It's design. It's the art of arranging truths and emotions into an architecture that feels natural. The best manipulator never hides reality. He organizes it. He knows that humans don't need to be forced. They need to be directed. You see it in every layer of civilization. A religion that teaches obedience as virtue. An economy that rewards consumption as freedom. A democracy that offers choice without influence. A culture that confuses visibility with value. These aren't accidents. They are systems designed to self-sustain. Emotional machines that extract compliance while making people feel empowered. And the brilliance of it is this. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like life. Every generation inherits this architecture without question. You call it tradition, law, normalcy. But beneath every norm lies someone's interest, someone's advantage, someone's design. Morality, too, is part of this construction, a beautiful weapon polished by repetition. The powerful learned early that the most efficient way to control a population isn't through restriction, but through narrative. If you can define the story of what is good, you control what people will sacrifice for. You control what they'll defend. You control who they'll follow. And here's the genius: you never need to announce the manipulation. You just need to make the system profitable for everyone who enforces it. Teachers, priests, CEOs, influencers, all think they're guiding, but they're maintaining. Each one a brick in the wall laid by an invisible hand centuries ago. Modern propaganda doesn't shout. It sings. It comes wrapped in choice, empathy, progress. It doesn't demand obedience. It invites participation. You don't suppress rebellion anymore. You monetize it. Every tweet, every cause, every outrage becomes content, data, and control. The architecture has evolved from religion to algorithm. Today, belief is measured in engagement. The new gods are metrics. The new temples are screens. And the new priests are the ones who control attention. The masses believe they are free because they can speak. But freedom of speech without freedom of reach is theater. They can post but not position. They can shout but not shape. Because power doesn't fear opinion, it filters it. And when you control the filter, you control reality. That's how manipulation scales, not by silencing, but by curating. It's not censorship that rules the modern age, it's distraction. The crowd fights over fragments, while the architects move entire foundations unnoticed. This is why most people can't see power. Because it doesn't look like tyranny, it looks like comfort, like convenience, like fairness, modernity, equality, words polished into weapons of perception. The Machiavellian mind doesn't rage against this architecture, it studies it. It asks, who benefits from this narrative? Who profits from this illusion? Who built this frame, and how do I use it? That is the difference between the ruled and the ruler. The ruled seek fairness inside the frame. The ruler designs the frame itself. One argues about morality, the other defines it. You can see this pattern in every empire that has ever existed. The pharaohs built pyramids of labor. The church built pyramids of guilt. The corporations built pyramids of aspiration. Each generation inherits a different shape, but the same architecture of control. Machiavelli didn't invent manipulation. He simply described it without shame. He showed that power doesn't corrupt, it clarifies. It reveals the underlying logic of civilization, that control is more sustainable than chaos, and illusion is more effective than law. But illusion can only work if people need it. That's why the system makes you dependent on comfort, on belonging, on certainty. Dependency is the cornerstone of manipulation. It replaces awareness with attachment. The Machiavellian breaks that cycle by studying design instead of worshipping it. He learns the mechanics of persuasion, not to deceive, but to defend. He sees propaganda as architecture and begins to build his own. He no longer reacts to messages, he creates messages that others react to. He no longer resists systems, he constructs systems that serve his vision. Because the moment you understand that morality, media, and culture are designed experiences, you stop trying to play the game better and start building your own board. And that's the fourth law of strategy. Don't destroy illusions, replace them. Because the crowd doesn't want truth, it wants meaning. And whoever provides meaning becomes their master. The architecture of manipulation isn't evil. It's efficient. It's how civilizations survive chaos, but it's also how individuals lose sovereignty. The difference between the two is awareness. So study the architecture. Walk through its corridors with open eyes. Admire its genius but never worship it. Because once you understand its design, you are no longer its occupant. You are its architect. There comes a moment when awareness feels like betrayal, when you finally see how the world truly works, not through justice, not through fairness, but through structure. At first it feels cruel, cold, empty, but that emptiness is the space where power begins. Most people never reach this place. They turn away the moment their illusions crack. They run back to the comfort of goodness, of certainty, of being right. But the few who stay, the ones who stand still in the storm, they begin to see the architecture beneath the noise. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. You start recognizing the patterns, how morality is used to pacify, how fear is dressed as virtue, how fairness is sold as obedience. You begin to understand that everything you once thought was solid, your job, your politics, your heroes, your gods, is scaffolding. A stage built to guide behavior, not to free it. But awareness without structure leads to despair. That's why cynics drown in their own clarity. They see the illusion, but not the opportunity. They recognize control, but never claim it. The awakening of strategy is different. It doesn't stop at truth, it builds with it. It understands that once you see the design, you are responsible for what you create next. That's the weight of awareness, and its gift. Strategy begins where morality ends. When you realize that goodness without wisdom is fragility, and wisdom without power is waste. The goal is not to escape the system, it's to master its rhythm, to play your role with intent instead of instinct. Machiavelli wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men who honor titles." He understood that systems gain legitimacy through those who play them well. When you learn to play consciously, you turn hierarchy into leverage. You stop reacting to power and begin sculpting it. The awakening of strategy is subtle. It doesn't roar, it doesn't announce. It unfolds quietly. The way dawn replaces night, not through battle, but through inevitability. You begin to move differently. You stop explaining, you start observing. You no longer waste energy on proving your virtue. You invest it in positioning your influence. You speak less, but when you do, your words land like architecture, designed, deliberate, unshakable. Because power doesn't live in what you say. It lives in what others do after hearing you. The awakening mind learns to operate on multiple planes. Externally, it participates in the game, pays the taxes, signs the forms, obeys the appearances. Internally, it designs the geometry that moves those forms. The outer obedience protects the inner sovereignty. That is the paradox of mastery. Invisibility is not weakness, it's armor. The strategist knows that rebellion isn't freedom, it's reaction, another form of control. Freedom is understanding. It's seeing the mechanism so clearly that you can decide how to use it. It's when you no longer fight the structure, because the structure has become your tool. That's the transition, from pawn to player, from believer to designer. It's not a moral journey, it's an intellectual one. The Machiavellian doesn't worship power, he studies it until it becomes instinct. He doesn't seek dominance, he seeks design. He doesn't conquer others, he orchestrates systems that make conquest unnecessary. The real strategist operates like gravity, unseen, silent, inescapable. He knows that most people are still chasing symbols, wealth, approval, virtue. But he chases structure, because structure decides where those symbols flow. He doesn't hoard influence, he circulates it. He understands that power multiplies when distributed strategically. That's how institutions are built. Not through possession, but through design. Not through morality, but through mathematics. Awakening, then, is not a moral awakening. It's mechanical. The moment you realize you are part of the machinery and decide to rewrite your function within it. You start to see how your actions ripple, how a word, a pause, a refusal can shift outcomes far beyond your reach. You begin to live not as a worker of systems, but as an author of them. And in that moment, the old illusions die. You no longer crave validation. You no longer need to be good. You no longer seek fairness, because you've understood the law that binds them all. Every illusion is an invitation to design something real beneath it. The Machiavellian mind doesn't destroy faith, it refines it. It doesn't reject compassion, it weaponizes it. It doesn't avoid morality, it reprograms it. Because to rule systems, you must speak their language fluently, even as you rewrite their grammar. This is the awakening of strategy, when you stop asking, "What should I do?" and begin asking, "What will this cause?" When you stop living for approval and start shaping perception. When you stop chasing certainty and start sculpting probability. Most will never reach this point. They'll live their lives in the warmth of illusion, mistaking noise for meaning and virtue for power. But the few who do, those who see the design and dare to build upon it, they become the quiet architects of civilization. Because power doesn't belong to the loud, it belongs to the precise. And wealth doesn't belong to the righteous, it belongs to the aligned. So if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of illusion, where truth feels cold and the world suddenly small, don't step back. Wait. Watch. Let your emotions settle like dust after an explosion. Because beneath that dust, you will find the blueprint. And once you begin to trace its lines, you will understand what Machiavelli meant, that goodness may soothe the soul. But only strategy moves the world. You've seen what most will never dare to see. That goodness is not strength. That morality, when worshipped blindly, becomes a leash. And that strategy, quiet, deliberate, patient, is the language of those who rule without being seen. Most will turn away now. They'll return to their noise, their comfort, their illusions of fairness. But if you've made it here, you've already crossed that threshold. It means you've stopped reacting. You've started thinking. Because strategy begins in silence. The silence where morality ends and awareness begins, where you stop seeking to be liked and start learning to be understood by few. The world rewards obedience in public, but it bows to precision in private. So stay, study, build the geometry of your mind until no narrative can trap you, because in this place, power is not domination. It's direction, and direction begins with design. Subscribe not for content, but for consciousness. This isn't entertainment, it's initiation. Every week we go deeper into the psychology of control, the architecture of illusion, and the strategy that frees you from both. You don't need to be good. You need to be aware, you need to be deliberate, you need to be strategic. So if you're ready to stop playing the game and start writing its rules, step into the silence. That's where the architects wait.